When I was 15 years old, I walked into my parents' bedroom and I looked at my mom and dad and said, I want to go to boarding school. And my dad looked up at me like I was crazy. And he said, Chris, Italians don't go to boarding school. But I knew it was time for a change, and I was ready to broaden my horizons. And despite my father's concerns, off I went to the woods of New Hampshire. I trace the origins of this decision back to southern Italy in 1934. My grandfather, Ed DeSetta, was 15 at the time, and Italy was a terrible place to be an entrepreneur back then. So he left his family, and he moved to America in search of a better life. After heroically serving the United States in World War II, he moved back to the Little Italy section in the city of Wilmington. Wilmington's the largest city in the state of Delaware, with a population of only 70,000 people, but it's strategically located between New York and Washington, D.C. Within 10 years of moving there, he had opened his own air conditioning and heating business, which at the time was like the new technology of the day. And my mother and her siblings literally were raised on top of the factory floor. And for an abbreviated period of time, they were the beneficiaries of my grandfather's growing success. But unfortunately, at the age of only 49, my grandfather died of a heart attack. And my mother, the oldest of 4 siblings, was only 19 years old. So my mom had to drop out of college, move home, and lead this business with my grandmother. They had to save it from failure. And miraculously, they did it. By the time I was born, my mom had married my father, and the two of them were running this business with my grandmother, my poor father. And and at that point, they had moved to the suburbs. But our life growing up was always surrounded around this factory, this shop, and the Little Italy neighborhood in which it was located. This was my playground growing up, and as my wife likes to say, this was my after-school program. Every day after school, my mom would come pick my brother and I up at school. She'd usually be about half an hour late, and off we went back to the office where my grandmother, my aunts, my cousins, who all could be found working there on any given day, they were the ones who raised us. This was a time where the workplace and home life was totally blurred, where on any given day I could smell my grandmother's gravy coming from that little kitchen in the back of the factory, where Louis Sparco, who ran the factory, would be making his sausage on the welding machine for lunch. This was a time between 2 eras where the hardworking men who worked for my grandfather were still in the back bending metal, and a time when my parents were really growing this business into something special, and one of their big projects was the air conditioning and heating at the DuPont World Headquarters building. This was a time when I witnessed a very different form of leadership. This is a time not about creating mission statements and strategic plans. Instead, I saw a variation where leadership was about having a very strong set of values and the belief that you could do something better than anyone else, and the dream to make that belief happen. It was about culture. Yes, back then, leadership as it is today was about hard work. We all know leadership's about hard work. But it was also about, in our family, it was about creating a work environment where employees were treated as family, and the fundamental underlying importance of always giving to community. This was about philanthropy that wasn't about writing a check, although that's always helpful. It was about showing up and giving of oneself. Fast forward. Boarding school worked out to be pretty great, as I think my dad would agree. I was surrounded by a wonderful group of peers and professors, and off I went to Princeton. I had an exhilarating early career in real estate investment banking and private equity in New York City. I was working on deals in Los Angeles and New York and Miami and even St. Bart's. But none of them had the pull of downtown Wilmington and the challenges it's faced. None of them on a deeper level could bring me back to the community that I knew I could help. So I moved back to Wilmington And I started working for my brother Rob and his partner Dave Poland. They had just started a real estate development company called the Buccini Poland Group. And it's funny, we often laugh. Our leadership style of almost 20 years basically goes back to 7th and 8th grade football. You suit up, you work as a team, and you learn how to take a hit. So our first deal was the acquisition of the DuPont World Headquarters building, the same project that my grandparents had done the air conditioning and heating in. It was a milestone not just because it was our first project, but it was massive in scale. It was 3 buildings. It was the largest office complex in the state of Delaware. And I often wonder, what the heck was DuPont thinking in trusting us with these iconic assets right in the heart of our city, in the best location? I was 28 years old. My brother would never admit we had no idea what we were doing. And we had to secure $100 million in the wake of the Russian currency crisis. This is back in '99. But DuPont's faith in us kicked off what has been a 20-year sprint, the largest building and rebuilding boom in the history of our city, and it marked the start of our efforts to redefine the modern history of this city. In 1999, as many of you will remember, you could shoot a cannonball down Market Street and you wouldn't hit anyone at night or on the weekend. We could not find one lender who would finance the transaction. They thought we were insane, and they were probably right. But since then, we have tried to lead a revitalization by investing $1.4 billion in our city. And we have given back. Yes, we're businessmen. Yes, we believe in we have to care about profits. But we care more about the underlying question, what can we do to better this community? Because we've always felt that the city of Wilmington and its residents weren't living up to their potential, that we all deserved more. So since this pioneering project in 1999, we've had a series of firsts. The first new market rate apartments built in the city in like a century. Since then, we've built about 2,000 units, about 2,500 people living there, 15 communities, and it's truly the bedrock of what we see as our city's future. Up above, you'll see before and after photos, and one of my favorite was the redevelopment of the former Delaware Trust building. We've all probably forgot about it now, but it had a 15-story steel tower in the middle, and it had been sitting like a stain on Rodney Square, the epicenter of our city, for years. We bought the building, we tore the steel tower down, insanity, and we restored it back to its historic shell. And we moved in about 300 people, the first market rate housing in the city. The next project was the first condominium high-rise in the city ever. Timing wasn't great. We built 25 stories high, and we delivered it right into a condo crash. But nonetheless, they were all filled, and they've been the bedrock for for-sale housing in our city. The first new multi-tenant office building built since Pete DuPont changed the banking laws in 1980. We built it with WSFS, and the lender had said, we were only 20% pre-leased, and the lender said to us, you have to guarantee if that you can't fill this up, you will pull the concrete out and make it back into a parking lot. The first new hotel in 28 years, the Westin. I don't think we've ever had as much criticism from the News Journal or other critics. And we were so proud the first year after opening, the whole competitive set had realized 15% increase in rooms rented that year. And close and dear to my heart, the revitalization of the Queen Theater, which sat vacant for nearly half a century. Many of you in this community made the $25 million raise to the foundation possible. And today we welcome 50,000 people coming nights and weekends and have Live Nation running it. The first new major grocery store doesn't sound like a big idea, like a big issue, but when you're living in an impoverished neighborhood and you're in a food desert and you have nowhere to go and get reasonably priced, healthy food, it's a huge deal. And we built this in the middle of a scrapyard. The first beer garden. So pioneering that the state legislature had to pass a law to allow its mere existence. The first IMAX and multiplex ever, and the only IMAX between Philadelphia and Baltimore. And the most difficult of all, the first of 3 Starbucks. We spent 16 years stalking Starbucks to make this happen. You may find my brother there cleaning tables on any given day. The first major league sports investment in our city, the 76ers recently announcing that they will build a training facility on our riverfront. And one very exciting number 2, the second owner of the iconic Hotel de Pont in its 107-year history. So, but the biggest game changer of all is not the buildings built. It's the jobs and it's the community that we're helping to build. Real change happens at the street level and in the neighborhoods. It's the coffee shop where you go and you meet your friend, your coworker for a tea. It's the grandparents, the parents, and the children all out on a summer's night at the beer garden. It's having a great night out at the Queen, seeing live music. And it's also creating jobs for those that are struggling to find them. As I reflect upon what leadership is or what creates leadership, I think about what was both inherited and that what was learned. Is leadership about ego? For some, perhaps, or ambition. But for me, leadership is about having a very strong set of values and the true vision that you can do something better than others. Leadership has been about nights and weekends driving the best parts and the worst parts of the city with my wife and children in the car, trying to figure out what could we do to help. It's meeting incessantly with young entrepreneurs from Philadelphia and trying to sell them on the dream of what Wilmington is today and what it will be very shortly. It was Friday night at 7 p.m. when we had no lender for the Nemours building, and just miraculously we were there, and the lender called to basically break up with us, and we convinced him to do the deal that set it all off. My brother and I have always tried to lead from the front. Lead by example, doing the hard stuff and with work ethic. We've always pushed our team and ourselves to live outside their comfort zone. In a pioneering industry like the one we're in, oftentimes our only data set is our gut. And to be clear, this has not been easy. In 2008, Lehman crashed. It was my birthday, and I remember huddling in my bedroom, talking to my partners, and like overnight, the hotel, like people just stopped traveling. And the next day, I walked into my mom's office looking for a little motherly comfort, and I said, "Mom, this is '08. Things are going to get really bad." And my mother said, "Good. You need to learn how to suffer." And you know what? She was right. It was empowering. It was emboldening. The probability of failure in our line of business has always been very high. And fear is a part of leadership. It's what pushes you. It is what pushes you. And we have struggled. I never could have embarked on this journey without the fundamental values instilled in me in such a young age. Work hard, respect others, give back, and have faith. Oddly, weirdly, we've never thought of ourselves as real estate developers. We're dreamers. Just like my grandfather dreamed of a better life in a new country. So follow your dreams, whatever they may be, whether it's making a better life for your family, embarking on or pursuing a better education, or just going for that goal you thought was unattainable, or trying to lead and inspire a once and now thriving city. So hold on to that faith, hold on to those dreams, and anything is possible. Thank you.